JT Crowley is Talking Books. On this show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, and I'm very privileged to have on the show today Brad A. LaMar to talk about the Celtic Mythos series he has written. The books are contemporary fantasy fiction for young adults. There are 4 books in this epic series. The first book is called The Obsidian Dagger. The second is The Metholith Union. The third, The Dominion Pulse. And the final book is The Bloodline Inheritance. The stories are built around Celtic clans, humans, leprechauns, necromancers, merrows, Sides, Ruas and Kelpies, all located in the Celtic Isles. Lands with small villages at the end of rainbows, and the Black Forest home to Morna the Necromancer, and a host of Celtic mythos creatures ranging from Kelpies to pixies. Magical, powerful weapons from daggers, swords, magical blasts, winged daggers, axes are all strewn across these 4 epic, beautiful, exciting books. Brad comes from Indianapolis metropolitan area in the United States, where he lives with his wife Laurie and his family. For the past 25 odd years, he has taught science to middle grade students. So let's invite him on the show so that he can talk about his books and a little bit about himself. Brad, come and join me.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm very good today. It's a nice sunny day here in the United Kingdom for once. It doesn't always rain here, everybody. Just a lot. Now, Brad, before we get into the books that make up the Celtic Mythos series, would you care to tell the audience a little about yourself and why you came to write this epic series?
Thanks, John. So I have been a teacher for the past 25 years here in the Indianapolis area, and got into it basically because I just wanted to make sure that students could learn. I felt like I was pretty good about helping people understand things, and science in particular, because science is one of the things that you can trust in the world, simply because, well, we try to, right? Simply because we're proving things with evidence and stuff like that. And so going exact opposite, writing science fiction and fantasy, it's just another part of who I am. And so when I got into this particular story, actually, I started off writing stories for my own 2 children, Evan and Paige. And I wrote a little story where the 2 of them and me went over to Ireland to look up some of our background, and they really wanted to see a rainbow and the leprechauns. And I'm like, okay, let's see if they're there. And in the story, we go there, and they're collecting rainbow sprinkles and stuff like that. And it's a great little time. Well, I put them to bed after that. I read it to them. And then I thought, what if something horrible happens at that moment? And then now we have an epic adventure to go on. And so that's kind of where that grew from. And so instead of naming the characters Evan and Paige, I just chose 2 other names, Brendan and Lizzie. So it kind of started from a little story I wrote for my kids, and it turned into this crazy adventure after that.
I wondered where, the characters originated from. Now I know. Yeah. When I look at the books throughout the series, they are built around various clans, humans, leprechauns, necromancers, etc. And they are within 2 locations. You talk about magical weapons, the obsidian dagger, bow staff, magical blasts, wine daggers, the sword of the protector. Why the theme to these books, with all the clans, the locations, the weapons? And how did you develop the main characters, Brendan and Lizzie, along with Dorian, Rory, Biddy, Morna, Dullahan, and, of course, the father character, Oscar?
Yeah. I'll tell you, so when you do a book like this, a series like this, and you're really going to include deities, so I'd already read things like from Rick Riordan with the Percy Jackson series, and you read things like Harry Potter or the Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, those sort of things. They have themes in them where it's good versus evil, And those type of stories have always appealed to me. So in writing this, I wanted to make sure that I had not only a definite good and a definite evil, but also along the way, I wanted to sprinkle in all these rich Celtic stories and myths and legends and deities. And really, the first book, I didn't even think about the gods of Celtic lore until the very end when I was writing it. So, and I don't want to spoil the book for anybody, but that happens. It becomes now a book of gods and legends, and including things like Merrows and Shees and Ruas and Kelpies and necromancers and all sorts of creatures like that. Those were just stories that were already in existence. Like here in America, a lot of people don't know that the Headless Horseman was actually from an Irish folklore, and his name was Dullahan. And so I wanted to kind of educate a little bit of us here that, you know, hey, these legends come from somewhere. They didn't just pop up in New York City or California. So, but yeah. And then as far as like how I chose the weaponry and things, I was just looking for each one of the heroes to have a different type of power that wasn't a superpower necessarily, but more like through the rainbow's magic, it gifted them with a way of protecting themselves and then in turn protecting the earth. And so I just kind of picked it based on what their personalities were, how I felt when I created them. This is a personality type that would have this sort of protection on them. And so Biddy gets the wings because she's kind of a high flying optimist. And then, you know, you get Brendan with his sword because he's the main character, Brendan with the sword. So he's got the way to protect themselves, and they had been for years and years and years, centuries. The sword was, you know, the way that it went. If you fall on the sword kind of deal. So that's where the thought process was in picking those weapons and creating those characters from Celtic legends that were already in existence.
I liked the clan, the Merrows. You know, the Merrows. You know, they have a monarchy. You know, at the time of the Obsidian Dagger, Queen Uis is in charge. And of course, another name for the clan is Mermaid. And because these beautiful part human, part fish people adore the waters and want to keep them clean. And so they're forced into hiding with the population burst of humanity. And they keep themselves to themselves. I liked the Merrows clan. You know, they are a really good clan, everybody. And I hope you enjoy them, because I certainly did.
Absolutely.
Now, Brad, let's go and give people a glimpse of what's in the first book. So the first book, everybody, is The Obsidian Dagger. This story you set in magical Ireland and Scotland, featuring two American teenagers, Brendan and Lizzie O'Neill, a mad witch, well, you've got to have a mad witch, who possesses the Obsidian Dagger, a desperate Princess Dorian of the Leprechauns clan, and a whole host of other characters, clans, magical weaponry. The story unfolds, everybody, across 21 wonderful, exciting, tense chapters. But I want to go to chapter 3 so that the audience can get a flavour of what's in this book. So chapter 23, Brad, you titled this Learning the Legend. You start the scene in italics about a World Cup in Rio de Janeiro, with Brendan some kind of a superhero. But you soon switch to Hewan's Bar in a remote part of Ireland, where Brendan and Lizzie, who have come with their father, Oscar, who has come to do some research on his family background. And what Brendan and Lizzie glean from the conversation in the pub is quite intriguing. Now, whether youngsters of that age should be in a pub, well, that's another question. Don't ask me why Brad put them in there. You can probably, I'll let him tell you that. But Brad, why the contents of this chapter and where are you taking the reader?
Well, I needed a way to bridge why they were there to begin with. So going from their father's research to how do I get them on the adventure? And so hearing a little tell and having your own family's name being involved in that tell as if there, so that drew a connection and an interest in Lizzie. And so she will eventually convince Brendan to go for a ride and to hunt out leprechauns and rainbows and all this magical stuff that she just heard about. And the way the scene is written, everyone else thinks it's ridiculous except the one guy who's telling the story. And so, it's kind of a little bit of a humorous chapter, but I had to get them going on their adventure, and that was one way to do so. How I envisioned this pub is more of like something that's here in America where there's a bar area and then there's an eating area. So that's why they were in the pub. It was kind of like the bar and grill here in America. So and that's why I'm familiar with that kind of thing. But anyway, I had to get them going on that adventure, and taking Oscar away, having him do his own research and leaving them behind. This gave them the opportunity to take the terrible car and go out and see if they could actually find some leprechauns.
Oh, and did they? Oh, yeah. Let's go to chapter 10, Brad, headed up Gorgosh. Now, Gorgosh, as far as I can determine, is a giant spirited man who has the ability to reform himself as a normal, average, everyday-sized man. Morna, the witch, apprenticed to Gonkar, the most powerful wizard to ever live, is up to something. Brendan, Lizzie, Dorian, and the others are far from where they should be. Their father, Oscar's project, funded by his university back in America, with a character, Charlie, now involved, is relaying the progress made in the pub at Gilsherry, particularly the unbelievable luck at the records room back in Galway. What's going on here, Brad? Are you definitely ramping up the storyline here?
Absolutely. So as now that we know there's this magical world exists, and Brendan and Lizzie now become privy to it. And so Gorgoch has a particular connection to Morna, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the next chapter we're going to discuss. But I wanted the reader to see this magical world, and that it's not just these leprechauns. It's now much broader, because in chapter 4, I introduced Dullahan, the headless horseman. And this is so much richer, so much broader. And I just felt like Celtic mythology didn't get enough credit. And it was a kind of there was a missing part in readership in fantasy. So that's why I focused so deeply on that. But yeah, I had to try to get Gorgoch in there, and then Morna, try to make her as bad a witch as I possibly could without being too scary here in the first book. I will say this, though, in the series, I tried to kind of mimic what J.K. Rowling did in Harry Potter, how it started off being a nice, soft book for that age reader, but your reader was going to grow up a little bit and continue to hopefully read. And so as this series goes, they get darker and darker and darker. I didn't intend to write kind of horror books, but kind of comes out that way a little bit.
They do. Now, I love chapter 15, which you titled The Witch's Ruse. You've taken us to a cave, cavern, Brad, a cave cursed with evil. Brandon, walking alongside Gorgosh, is looking for a ruas. Red orbs flare up to life with sets of eyes. The cavern is eventually lit up by hundreds of Christmas lights. What's the history behind the cave, and how important is this scene to the overall theme of the book and possibly the series?
So the cave in particular, there's a connection with Gorgoch in this particular cave. So a ruas is an undead human who's been tranced into becoming basically like a zombie. They're alive still. So their skin tightens and pales, their teeth grow, their claws extend. They have the ability to scale walls and all sorts of things. So they're very scary things if you think about it. So I don't know who curated that in Celtic mythology, but they did, and there it was. So I thought, I have to use this. And so Gorgoch, his whole thing, because the sort of a little bit of a background was his betrothed, who he was going to marry, was murdered by the witch and her cretins. And so he went to exact revenge when he was in his human self. And she cursed him to be this half man, half spirit. And she used him to create all sorts of havoc out in the countryside there, in Scotland and other places. And so when he was able to escape her, he was just kind of floating on his own and living his life and befriending the different clans like the leprechauns and things like that. So yeah, the cave does play some importance, especially in this particular story, because we have Gorgots there. And so it was a way to tell this, again, to emphasize what kind of evil Morna was and how she would use people. I mean, these people who become the Ruaz, they didn't ask for that. They're just innocent people who just get swept up in it, which, as we see so often in the world, where evil people take innocent lives, just like what's happening currently. So, yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
Ah, interesting. Now, the second book, Brad, The Megalith Union. Here we have 22 chapters of high-octane drama from chance encounters, celebrations, druid secrets, anxieties, plans, battles, pomp and circumstance, and much, much more. Brendan is now a college freshman, back home in America, and just as life is settling down, fate intervenes. And the adventures start off all over again, everyone. Elathan, the golden god of Celtic lore, is reborn out of the ashes of a dead king and an iniquitous witch. Wow, this book looks good. It really does, everybody. So let's have a look at some of the chapters that you, Brad, have written here. Chapter 2, Chance Encounters. Oscar the father is back home. He gets a surprise visit from Charlie. He wakes up wondering if he's had a dream. He hoofs it to Sullivan's bar with a spiral notebook and a pen. His world is a bit of a blur here. Brendan wants to be a doctor, for he's seen enough bloodshed during his quest last summer. He settles into Celtic Heritage House, which is going to be his home for the next 4 years, while he's at Syracuse University. This story is getting really good, everybody. Where are you taking the readers here, Brad?
Well, so we're in America now instead of being across the ocean. And so Charlie is still a character involved in Oscar's life, but I wanted to indicate that it's probably not what exactly it seems to be, not just a friendship between two guys who were traveling and that sort of thing. So I wanted to make it more of a mystery. And then having Brendan there in New York puts him, New York State, not New York City, but puts him in with some other characters that I can introduce that are now, they're also Celtic myths, but they're American myths too.
Really?
And yeah, well, they would be. Yeah, they brought over because a lot of the Irish came over, and so they brought their traditions with them, like Halloween, for instance. And so I wanted to introduce some other humans in here that weren't part of the Protectors line, so not part of the O'Neills, where Brendan and Lizzie and Oscar are. So that's where I introduce a roommate named Ken, and I introduce a possible love interest to mix it up a little bit for Brendan and Megan. And of course, she's not what she seems. But yeah, so she is not.
How is she? No.
So just kind of giving some of that human side of it to him again, to where he'd risen up to this level of, oh, wow, he's really a protector. And then I wanted to make sure he was humanized as well. And so that's when we brought him back to college. He has a heart and a sensibility of, he doesn't like the bloodshed. He didn't ask for this. So what could he do? So that's where the idea that maybe he should become a doctor as part of that. And so he's started that journey, but he's also still being drawn back into that Celtic world because he's got Dorian still across the ocean and they can communicate. But now all of a sudden he's seeing it happen around him here in America as well. And that's kind of the interesting part of that.
In between moments, Brad, chapter 12, I found fascinating, and equally so chapter 20, pomp and circumstance. So in chapter 12, why have you put Conquer and Dullahan in New York? Does the fate of the earth depend on Brendan's actions? For millennia, forces that are beyond his comprehension have been locked in battle for control over the world. Humans and magics alike have been made into mere pawns here in this part of the book, the plans of the gods. So the question is, why have you put Conquer and Dullahan in New York? Does the fate of the Earth depend on Brendan? And what are Nuda and Elathan doing on Earth? What are they doing?
So with Conchar and Dolahan, I had to find a way to get us to Otherworld, because a big part of Celtic mythology is these 6 realms. I just chose 6 of the realms, but 6 realms of Otherworld that exist, and they have different little names, like the realm of Armon, realm of the caverns, realm of the heavens, and so on. So I thought taking this. So I've been to, England, over there, been to America. Where can I go? And I had to include Otherworld. So how do I get to Otherworld? There had to be a way to get there, and that's where the title of the book, Megalith Union, comes into being. But the megaliths themselves aren't sufficient enough and magical enough to get these characters to Otherworld. And so Conchar and Dullahan, they're on the search for some magical trinkets and things that can actually make that happen. Aletheon being raised again, he was at one point in time, not spoiling anything because this was from the book, he was trapped already by Nueda. And in doing so, Nueda also trapped himself. He had to save the Earth and Otherworld from Aletheon's terror. But Aletheon found a way to come back. And when you read the first book, you'll see how he comes back in the prologue. But
what a good clue there. Read the first book, everyone.
Yeah, so there's definitely reasons why they're placed where they are, and I hope there's enough mystery and twists and turns. I think there are, especially when you start reading and you get to someone like Megan.
Oh, there are. There's huge twists, everybody. Believe you me. Let's go to the chapter Pomp and Circumstance, which is chapter 20. How does the narrative here fit into the overall grand scheme of things?
So in this particular chapter, you're looking at Corways, that's the town of the leprechauns, being basically destroyed. And now we have, it really fits in. I don't want to give away too much, where we have a reveal. And
we have a reveal.
We have a reveal. And so I'll leave it at that. But it's very, very important, because once the town is destroyed, now you have a sense of this is getting real for these clans, these people. This is not just the witch conning around trying to take over power here on Earth. Now it's a much greater risk is out there, and they're finding that they themselves aren't enough to stop who they have to stop, but yet there's no one else who can even attempt to.
There you go. Now, I said there are 4 books. Let's get to the third one. So let's turn our attention to the third book in the series, the Dominion Pulse. For me, this has shown 20 chapters of exhilarating, edge of the seat chain of events, ruthless enemies, bonds, haunts, hidden thoughts, demons, and warnings. After losing his father to Elathan, Brendan is forced to recuperate, and come to terms with the colossal responsibility that's been imposed upon him. The areas in this book that did it for me were chapters 4, 10, and 17. Ruthless enemies, the past is the future, and acquiring power. So let's take the audience, Brad, to Ruthless Enemies, chapter 4. Brendan has been working on his powers and in front of Dorian. The debris of wood after the attack from the Magots is restored into neat piles that now serve no purpose but for wood fire for the clans over the forthcoming winter months. Why does Elathan need 3 banshees, a necromancer, and a human in his fold? And what role is Camillus playing here? Why is he in cahoots with Elathan? What are you doing here to the reader? What are you doing?
Not the torture, but I guess in some ways. So Camillus is a god of war who craves power. And so he wants to be around power. And at that moment in time, Aletheon is the most powerful god there is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's about to become more powerful, which is the crazy part, because Brendan has already gone up against him and has seen how powerful he is to that point. So the Dominion Pulse part of it is telling you that there's a Dominion Pulse, a little essence of a soul of a realm, essentially, where if someone can control the soul, they control the realm. And so why Aletheon has surrounded himself with so many other powerful gods and banshees and all these other things is because if he's going to have those realms, he needs to be able to place someone in charge of the realm that's loyal to him. And so when you see Camulos or Duai or one of these other ones be so loyal to him to a fault, that's really what's happening in that case. They are trying to gain power themselves. So maybe they won't be as powerful as him, but if they're powerful enough to be the watcher or the owner of the realm, then now it's pretty good power.
Wow. Chapter 10. The past is the future. Brad, you start the narrative here with Concha, the wizard, and the seeker wandering around Bruges' realm of caverns. Concha was hoping that the Dominion Pulse was in the caves. They encounter Dewey, the dragon god, the watcher of the realm, everybody. Brendan, on the back of a griffin, flying over Scotland, the Isle of Lewis, to be precise, looking for Bibi. King Arden, the king of the seeds. His people have gone into hiding, having witnessed Aletheon's power. And you talk about the Seeker is the only one who can sense where the Dominion Pulse of the realm is located. This is a really busy chapter, Brad. What's going on here? And what is the Dominion Pulse? And why is it so important to Aletheon's overall plan?
Yeah, so the Seeker comes from the line of protectors. So Noeda had given the earth a line of particular people. And so as they have children, those children then become the new protector. And so for a long time, the protector hasn't really been needed because while back, Noeda had trapped Aletheon and himself. So there was basically the tether between Otherworld and Earth had been cut off. So to bring that back into line, that's part of what the Megalith Union was, finding those different items to make that tether come back and to bring Aletheon back to Otherworld, where he could then take the Seeker, who is the only one who has the capability of sensing, because sensing in Otherworld, he's the only one who senses the pulses, and that's simply because he is in the line of the protectors. Now, had he taken Brendan or Lizzie, they also could have become a Seeker, but he had he took the weaker one, the older guy, like me. It took the older guy, and but also with more wisdom, and so he was able to use him to try to find these pulses, and they become so important because once he controls all of Otherworld, now he can travel back to Earth, which is what the last book is about, and find the Emerald Crown of the World.
Oh, we'll come to that one.
Which
now, chapter 17, Brad, acquiring power. You kickstart the narrative here with Aletheon gritting his teeth, tensing his muscles as he sends a massive wave of golden energy directly into Argona. Aaron tries to intervene with little effect. Aletheon is just too powerful. And then, like in many of your chapters in the books, you flick from the past to the present day. Here you have Brendan and others at the campus of Sirius University. A detective, Simons, comes on the scene. So as they go down the vortex, you flipped back and taking Detective Simmons this time as he goes down the vortex. And of course, Oscar's role here. Could you expand here without giving too much away why you flip back and forth and what's going on here?
Well, how I write is I write like I'm seeing a movie, and so I want to give
most authors do.
Yeah, I hope so. So I'd like them to see what's happening to characters and to not ignore the character that are also important in the books. Just because they're not Brendan doesn't mean they're not important. They're also giving rich background and, in many cases, a sense of urgency for the reader themselves, so that they can see that, oh, this is high stakes. So the Aletheon torturing Argona and Arwen, and these are two very powerful. One is a goddess, and the other one is the first line of the protector, Arwen. And so him being pushed around, it plays to the power of the Aletheon. Like, oh man, this puts it at such a higher risk for Brendan and his group to even come close to thinking that they could defeat Aletheon. It gives it that much more of a sense of urgency.
Now, you've already mentioned it. You've got a fourth book. I know you have. So let's go to it. The Bloodline Inheritance. I have to say, Brad, this series so far has been absolutely breathtaking. So let's see what you reveal in this book. My understanding, having gone through the book, that this is a journey that touches upon best laid plans, the unexpected, visions of the crown, harsh realities, trials, mind games, plus rallies for war and more. Elethan seeks the emerald crown of the world, which possesses an ancient magic, whose power is menacing. As Earth's rightful protector, Brendan must stop Elethan in his tracks to save the world. However, with Brendan under a poison curse, the others have to step up to the mark. So like in all the other books, let's give people a glimpse of what's in this one. Let's go to chapter 1, Forging Ahead. Oscar's father is back. It hadn't been an easy task retrieving him. Brendan took another beating at the hands of Elethan and nearly lost his sister Lizzie and Dorian, who he has fallen in love with, in the process. Elethan's powers have been expanded exponentially. Brendan is cautiously optimistic about the future. He not only managed to save both his sister and his girlfriend from being blown to bits by the terrible god, but he has a chance to see how his own powers stacked up against the altered god. Tell us, Brad, the storyline here and the character you have within, and where are you taking the reader in this opening chapter? What are you preparing everybody for? What's coming down the line?
Well, I had to show that Brendan was also gaining power as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense at all for at the end, if they're going to have any chance that they didn't have any chance, essentially. So I had to show he was getting stronger as well, but he's always going to have that self-doubt in him. And that self-doubt is very human. Whereas if you're a god, that maybe wouldn't be a thing because we don't know any gods here. So, but a human quality, having that self-doubt, having a lack of confidence, just not knowing that you're up to task. That's a very common theme that we all can get behind because that's how we feel. But yeah, so I had to kind of give him a little bit of a major risk, but I also as you said, I wanted the others to step up as well and show that the team is the team. It's not just Brendan at all. I even put him down for a while to where, he still is in the book and stuff, but I got to see the other ones, what their merit is. And I wanted to show that to the reader.
I'm a great believer in this. So you have your main character, but sub-characters are just as important because they need to back up the main character and carry the story as well. And a lot of authors do that. And when I looked at your books, you've done that very, very successfully.
Thank you.
So chapter 6, Visions of the Crown, Brad. The storyline here is, in my mind, is very substantial. Why the lake scene? That made me think. Brendan's found new powers. The sword. What's Nuda's and Morrigan's role here? You talk about a nether purely, and I apologize if I've got that word pronounced wrong. We have a creature called a Nazeg.
Yeah, Nazeg. Yep.
Nazeg?
Yep.
So, what are Elethan and his earth servant Cranach up to? Now, this is another busy chapter. It's full of tense twists and turns. It's totally engrossing. So why the lake scene? Talk to me about Brendan's new powers, the swords, You sure
Brendan,
keep us all busy, don't you?
I tried to. Yeah. So as Lathan's powers are expanding, so are Brendan's. It's kind of like a universal. How do we match this? So there's a yin and a yang. There's a matter and an antimatter, that kind of deal. So his powers are also growing in that regard, and so he's trying to get a sword from the bottom of this lake, and the lake has been basically poisoned by Lathion, and so because everything in Otherworld now at this point has been poisoned by Lathion, and so as Brendan goes down there, he's absorbing some of that poison essentially, and that drives rage, because that's what a Lathion is. He's rage and evil and hate, and this is where we see a little bit of a shift in Brendan's own character, like who he is. And but I thought it was important to have that scene so that you could see that he actually had to rely on his family and his friends and his girlfriend, and seek out help, because we all can't do it alone. Again, another human thing, that you just because you're the greatest thing on the planet doesn't mean you don't need help. And so I had to put that in there just simply because I wanted him to show some of that vulnerability still.
And I think you did it very well.
Thank you.
And finally, let's head to chapter 20, Rally for War. I thought this was a brilliant chapter. Oh, boy, it is. Corways has been decimated. Lizzie excited to see that the leprechaun myth is true. Dorian and Brendan are still in the other world. Cranach can't believe his eyes. PG has made short work of 2 wailing banshees. And it's the first time, Brendan, we've laid eyes on Nuda's face, the silver god. This is the first time that Brendan has actually seen his face. We have megaliths, armies of goblins and dragons, red caps. Oh, you do give us something to think about. Go on, spill the beans as to what, but don't give too much away here, because this is towards the end of the book. Where are you taking us here?
I'm giving it to the point. This is the point. This is the tip top apex of what the storyline was. And so it had to be larger than life. It had to be where I take the reader on. Basically, this is the twist and turn of the roller coaster. That's the main deal, and go out with a bang. And so so we have the sides kind of getting together, and Brendan and finally gets to meet Nueda, and because remember, he's been trapped in a kind of a pocket dimension, but somehow Brendan's able to find him and enter that dimension, and it's like crazy to everybody who's there watching this happen. Dorian can't even see anybody inside of the place, but there's Nueda kind of laid out, and Brendan finally gets to see who his sponsor is, essentially, the one who's responsible for giving this power over. Because if you recall from the first book, Brendan glows silver, and eventually he gets to glow with that white power, like where it's going to be electric, kind of like a static kind of power, but you see almost like a fluorescent bluish white, which is interesting. I just wanted him to be able to evolve to where he didn't need Nueda anymore, and now he's almost his own god.
Did you enjoy writing these series, and what do your students think to your books?
Oh, they can't believe that there's an author in their building, first of all, and it always shocks them. Though I'll have the books lying around just in here. I'm always encouraging reading and such for my students, and so they'll pick it up and be like, "Wait a second, what's your name?" Mm-hmm. And then they'll flip to the back and see my picture in it and stuff, and so they get really encouraged a lot of times, and just think it's a really cool thing that's there. And then every time I come out with a new book, they just are shocked every time. And it shouldn't be, because with my latest book, I dedicated it to them, because it literally came from a story I wrote for my students a while back, a long time ago. And they're part of my encouragement.
So what's next for you in terms of writing, other books? Now, what other books have you done? Briefly tell us.
Okay, I'll even show you. So the very first novel I ever wrote was Anger Island, and after the success of Celtic Mythos, I was able to get the first book I ever wrote published. And so that was pretty awesome. And then, I had an agent for that years ago, and this one's science fiction. Then I wrote the second book, Anger Island, The Crystal Cavern. It's got some twists and turns in it too, because I cannot not do that. So, but it's more science. I said science fiction. And then this is a story, the very first story I ever wrote for my students, and it looks weird, and it is, but it's fun and humorous. It takes place on an alien world. So those are the 7 books I have out currently, and more that are going to be on the way in the coming year. So it's an exciting time for me.
Who do you see as your readers, and who do you want, or should I say more directly, who would you want to see reading your books? Everybody, or just youngsters, or?
As far as like the Celtic Mythos series, I could see that middle school up. I know that a lot of adults have enjoyed the books as well.
I enjoyed it, and I'm an adult.
You are an adult. I enjoy it
Sometimes.
It's on the day. Yeah. So, but like Zorp, that's kind of aimed at like a 4th through 8th grader, young readers. But then I have other things coming down the line too. I've got a writing project with another author named Jeff Bailey, and it's an adult contemporary book, historical fiction. So, I mean, I write all over the place. I write poetry, I write lyrics. So I try to be diverse.
Where can people get your books from?
Everywhere books are sold, Amazon. Some of them are on Target or Target.com. You can get them at Barnes & Nobles. You can order them through that. Kobo. I mean, a lot of them are available through Kindle and ebooks. This one is available through audiobook on Amazon. They did that. So, but be careful there, because when the AI does the reading, it calls Aletheon, it calls him elephant. But it's whatever. I was just happy to have an audiobook.
Well, Brad A. LaMar, thanks for joining me on the show today. Brad A. LaMar, everybody, with his fabulous, epic, mammoth series, the Celtic Mythos series. I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're in the world. Until next time, stay safe.